Well, hello. This is Officer Gardner Jeff Bush, and we're here with you for Leadership with Vision, another podcast. We'll give you just a few minutes to talk to your friends and see about inviting somebody else to come and be with us. If you know of anybody might be interested in talking about church planting and different models to use in church planting, we would invite you to come along for the journey and go invite them to spend a little bit of time with us. You want to say anything as we get started there, Jeff, giving people a second to come?
Yes, sir. We have the marriage retreat coming up, and we do a marriage retreat every year in July. This one is July 26th through the 28th, and we would love to invite you. In fact, we actually have 2 openings right now. We're mostly filled, but we actually have 2 openings left in the hotel. And if you are interested, you can go on visionbaptist.com and find out some more as far as, the schedule or whatnot. It's July 26th through 28th. We'd love to have you come down and visit us here in Atlanta.
And there are already 30 families signed up to be there, and so you'd have a lot of fun. We'd love to have you come, and love to get to spend a little bit of time with you. While we give everybody just a second to come along, we'll be in Ohio for the Our Generation Summit, and I'll get Jeff to give you some details, but we would really like to invite you to come and to spread the word all around Ohio about what's going to happen. God has greatly blessed the summit. There are literally dozens of missionaries on the field that God dealt with through either the camp or the summit. And the summit is going to be all day Friday and half a day Saturday in Ohio. And we are going to have all kinds of missionaries coming from everywhere in the world to talk to you. And I think you're going to love it. So I'd like to invite you to come. You'll give them the details on that?
Sure. Yes, sir. It's going to be in the Columbus, Ohio area, so central Ohio. It'll be December 28th and 29th, so the last weekend of the year. That's a Friday, Saturday, December 28th and 29th. You can find out a lot more at visionmissions.com/events, and it has a little bit more information there. We would love to have you come there, and making plans right now. We have several that have already signed up, and we've got plenty of time, but they've already signed up and registered, and so looking forward to that.
Unless you live in the area, you're going to want to get there on Thursday night. We'll be there on Thursday night, and that way you can start first thing on Friday morning with us, because it'll be an all-day affair, and we're looking forward to it. You're welcome to drive in or come on in on Thursday night and get set up. We have a lot of people watching from different parts of the Spanish world, and so I want to say hi to them. Give me just a second. Saludos a los que hablan español, que están viendo. Estamos acá haciendo un podcast en inglés acerca de cómo plantar iglesias, un modelo de plantar iglesias. Entonces, discúlpanos que estamos en otro idioma. You want to say something about that in Spanish?
Well, Rosa, saludos, hermana, y a todos los demás. Espero que estén bien. Y bueno, para la próxima lo vamos a hacer en español, ¿sí?
Ahí está. Pues saludos a todos. Hey, we're back with you in English. We'd like you to invite as many people as you can to come and watch. And anytime anything is said that might be a blessing to you, give us a thumbs up or whatever. And we're going to start here in just a second, unless you have something else, that we'll go ahead and start talking about this and what our subject for today. Are you about ready?
Yes, sir. I'm ready.
All right. Well, let me get the podcast started. I messed it up last time, so we want to try to get it done right today. Turned everything off on my computer. Us old people have these issues, you know what I mean? Well, I would like to welcome you to Leadership with Vision podcast. It is an honor and a privilege to be here with you. And we have been here in a while, but we're going to try to get back to doing this. This is obviously going to be live on Facebook. The people on Facebook will be able to communicate with us even as we're talking. They can ask questions and make points that they want to talk about, and we will respond to them. So that's where some of the interaction will be coming from, is we have a live audience of listening to us on Facebook. And today we want to talk to you about some different methods of church planting. And so wanted to start there. As you listen here, feel free to ask questions We're going to talk about churches on the mission field. Would you like to say something as we get started there, Brother Jeff?
Well, we have several different friends that are watching, some that are overseas. Miguel Sanabria, that's in Colombia. Praise the Lord. Vision Baptist Missions missionary that arrived about a month ago, I guess. And so we're excited. He's in. Jonathan Anderson's watching from Mexico. Several missionaries that are on the road right now. Gregor Keelan is watching from Tunisia. And so glad he's there. And I've got several friends overseas watching. And I'm excited. What we're going to talk about today, I think, is going to be a blessing. And as Pastor already said, if you have a question or a comment or want to discuss a little bit further, we'd love to do that. So just jump in on the conversation, and we'd like to discuss it.
Well, let me start off with, as a missionary, when you're going to the field to start churches, you're going to be faced with several different models of church planting. One would be to start one church and get it indigenous, get it where it could live and continue on without you. Leave that church and go to another church, and then get that one indigenous and leave that one and go on to another church. That is one model, and there is nothing wrong with that model. I wouldn't say anything is wrong. I would just say I have a little bit of a different opinion. When I first arrived in Peru, I had the opportunity in 1989. They had the largest gathering of independent Baptists in the country, and I had the opportunity of being there. There's Randy Sturwalt all the way from Kenya. Hello, Brother Randy, or Miss Phyllis, or both. So good to see you there. So I had the opportunity to visit, to be in a meeting as a young missionary, new on the field. I was there only to listen, and I got to see all sorts of different things. One friend of mine started a church approximately once a year. And I had preached in many of those churches. He's a good man, loved God, one of the best men I've ever known. And so his motto was find a national and work with that guy about a year and then move on to another church and start another church. And the problem I found with that was that they ended up being fairly weak churches. They didn't have time to grow and mature. And so when he left the church, often the pastor wasn't being paid a salary. He would leave them with a building semi-constructed that often years later when I was there wasn't constructed. I often met bitter pastors because they said, we don't get a salary because our people were never trained in giving by the missionaries, and so it set a bad precedent. So that's not the model that I prefer. I don't think it's wrong. I just don't prefer that. Would you like to make any comments there?
As Pastor already said, we're for anybody that's getting the gospel out. And there are a lot of methods. There are a lot of ways. And praise God, the world definitely needs the gospel. We understand that. So we're not here to criticize or to even argue with anybody. But we are going to talk not between the good and the bad, but the better and the best. And we do believe that there are some better ways that maybe we could start a church to get more done. And so hence that being our foundation, we're going to go from there and talk about different methods of church planting.
Now, we believe in indigenous church planting. And indigenous church planting is that church will, number one, be able to make its own decisions without outside influence. And so the church people will be able to make their own decisions. That's extremely vital. A weakness in my own ministry was that I did not train deacons. I had plenty of Bible college students that I could use in the capacity of deacons, and so I never trained any deacons. And the problem is that years later, a pastor, one of my sons in the ministry, and a guy I love very much, has actually been he got the people on his, the church had a personalidad jurídica. They had a legal document like an incorporation paper, set of corporation papers, and he got the people to sign off for him to go and make changes to those papers, and he actually took out liens on 3 church buildings and is stealing the money. And there's no one stopping him. I didn't build strong enough laymen. I built laymen that said yes, sir, to the pastor, and that is so detrimental and so wrong. And so, there's just a lot of mistakes you make. So indigenous means they can make their own decision. But also indigenous means that a pastor would be held accountable for what he's doing so that he could not take advantage doctrinally or financially or even in the way he treats people, he ought to be held accountable. So they need to learn how to govern themselves. Then they need to learn how to pay their bills. And they need to be able to pay their bills, which includes supporting their pastor. And then they need to learn how to reproduce themselves. Seeing other people saved, other churches started, is a basic part of church planting on the mission field.
You know, when I guess a temptation for me and probably for many, when I was on the mission field, was things started to go well and people started to listen, and it got to my head very quick. And quickly I thought, people like me, and I enjoy the preaching and all these different things. And if a missionary is not careful, everything begins to go according to what he says and what he does and how he wants it. And it can almost become his little kingdom. And our whole goal with making it become indigenous is that it doesn't all ride on the missionary's back. In other words, the missionary leads it, yes. But as Pastor's saying, if we don't have strong men in the church, if we don't have structure in the church, if we don't have it set up for the day that the missionary will leave, and I remind you, every missionary will leave the mission field one day, whether it's by death or age, or whether it's by the government kicking them out or a furlough or whatever, every missionary will leave. So the question is, what's going to happen after the missionary leaves? Is the ministry going to fall apart, or is it going to continue on? If it's an indigenous church, we taught them how to go forward, then it can continue on well long after that the missionary is gone.
I think a weakness of the independent Baptist model, and I am independent Baptist, but I think a lot of times the weakness is we're so strongly pastor-led that we keep our men fairly weak, and therefore pastors are able to abuse and mistreat churches, and that ought not to be. And on the whole, we would say, no, that's not true. Pastors wouldn't do that, but they have been known to do it. One's doing it in Peru right now, and it happens all over the world. And so I would like to say that we want to build stronger people. I've seen several people coming on and saying hi. There's Jamie Smithy from down in Chile. He's in a section of Santiago, and so hello back to you there, Jamie. Let me explain to you, and there's Southern Pines, North Carolina, David Francis. Well, let me explain to you one of the things that we probably most dislike is what's called the mother church. And that word mother church can be used in two ways, and so all terms have to be adequately defined, or it turns out to be something that people misinterpret and do not understand. So mother church can often be used in the sense that we use it with the Roman Catholic Church, and that is, and by the way, that is in Protestantism it's that way often, with Presbyterians and with Methodists, and even often with Assembly of God or different denominations, where you have a central hub, where you have a central office, where you have a headquarters for the church or whatever. And so sometimes a pastor or missionary would like to start a mother church, and then as they start young churches, they control those churches. They hold on to the title of the church's property. They want all the offerings run through them. They get to pick who gets to be a pastor and who doesn't get to be a pastor. They make all the decisions. They act as the mother in that situation. That is definitely not what I would believe in. But you see that in Latin America, and you see that in mission work, and you see it in lots of ways all around the world. You want to say anything about that?
No, sir.
Okay, so the other kind of mother church, see, some people use the word mother church, and they use it in a way I would definitely agree with. They would say mother church, and what they mean by that is giving birth to baby churches. But a good mother, a good father will raise up their children to adulthood, train them and prepare them for adulthood, and let them go. They don't hold on to them. They don't try to use them. They don't try to take advantage of them. They don't try to manipulate or control them. And so if you're using the term mother church in that way, then I like that term. That's fine. So the idea is that I am going to raise up my children so they can take the gospel around the world, and they can tell others about what's happening, around the world. With they can tell the gospel. They can start their church. They can own their own property, and their church will be autonomous and local. Baptist really speaks to the fact that we believe in independent, autonomous, local churches that make their own decisions, that answer to no headquarters, answer to no group above them. We may join together in fellowship. We join together in associations. We may join together in even conventions, but our churches are to remain independent, autonomous, making our own decisions. So that would be the way I would view the mother church. I'm going to change and talk to you just a little bit about the model church, because that's where we're headed. Do you want to say a word about that?
Yes, sir. I actually just the other day I finished a book on raising sons, and in the book it said, "Dads, it's our responsibility to make sure that moms with their sons, that moms don't overprotect them, because if they overprotect them, then the boy will never grow, he'll never learn. He'll either rebel on one side or he'll become effeminate on the other side. And so it's dad's responsibility to say, Mom, we love you, but you got to let the boy be a boy. Well, I think in the same way we could say on the mission field it happens. Sometimes the missionary becomes the dad or the mom in that situation, and he'll control, either to the point where the young people, they rebel and they go off and we say they're wicked and they're wrong and they shouldn't do it, or we press them down so much that they just become weaklings, and then when we walk out, they go Pentecostal or they go another route, and it's our fault because we've set them up for failure. So this mother church, as Pastor said, we have to be careful. We do want to reproduce ourselves, but we don't want to mother them till we smother them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's it's often referred to in missionary literature as paternalism, and it is where the missionary feels like he is the father, and he should be the leader and the director, and he should tell people what to do and how to think. And that leads to a very little respect for the national pastor. And the truth is, the national pastor ought to be treated on an equal footing with the missionary. He ought to get to a point in his life that he is the missionary or the pastor. His church is supporting him, and he's able to do the work. So it ought to be that that's the way they're being raised up as churches and trained. So that brings me to the term we want to use today, and that's a model church. I would like to suggest to most of the missionaries that you're going to start a lot of churches, and I hope you're going to be like a mother church in the idea of birthing many churches. You're going to be like a mother church birthing many churches. But at the same time, I would challenge you to have a model church. And by model church, I mean build a church they can follow after. Build a church that can be a model to them. It's very difficult to build something you've never seen. If there's no architectural plans, if there's no experience, it would make it very difficult. So we arrive on the mission field, and we see people get saved, and we see them trained, and we get them into a church. And then in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, we send them out to start a church. And as they leave to go start that church, there's no training. And so they don't know what they're doing. That's not meant to be it's not meant to be insulting. They've not been taught. They've not been trained. They've not been shown how to do what they're supposed to be doing. And so they don't know what they don't know what it looks like. And since they don't know what it looks like, then they often end up doing things that the missionary would be hey, this is not the right way to do it. So I suggest a model church. You take a church and you only put in the kind of money a normal pastor would be able to put in, and you help them in the way you would help every other church. But you stay there and you set up Sunday school like you want it to look. You set up Sunday morning, Sunday night, midweek services like you think they ought to look. You set up deacons like you think they ought to look. You build a model so that every pastor would say, that's how a church is supposed to look. I'm trying to build a church modeled after the church in Antioch. And our home church they did it this way. And so if they go to the field with that attitude, if they go to start a new church with that attitude, they'll know much more about what they're trying to do.
I remember in the book of Acts where it wasn't even a Christian man. I think it was when they were trying to take down the apostles, and they wanted to destroy it. And one of the men said, no, let him go. Because if this is of God, it's going to continue on. If it's of man, it's going to fall. Well, I say in the mission work as well, if as a missionary, if we're not careful, it depends all upon us. and when we leave, it will fall. It must depend. We must train them, help them, and it depends on God so that we'll continue on way after that we're gone.
Even in that model church where you're working, you want to constantly be working yourself out of a job. You want to, it may take 10 to 15 years before you're out of that church, but you want to be lifting up nationals and you want to be lowering yourself. You want them to increase and you want you to decrease. And the idea will come that you will soon leave that church and move on to another area to do another church. But you want to build a church that they can see what it looks like. How are offerings taken? How are offerings counted? How are Sunday school teachers trained? How are deacons put into play? How are decisions made in the church? How's the finances being held? Do you have a men's meeting? So that's the idea. We want to work at going at it that way.
We have several different questions, but here's one question from John Walls in Taiwan. In building a model church, how should the missionary spend on monthly payments, knowing guys under him will not have missionary support?
Well, I think the main thing is that you want to teach them from the very beginning how to be givers. And I think you want to be very careful not to be giving so much money that when you leave, the thing's going to die. And my suggestion is you help them get a building that, and then all they got to do is pay utilities and a pastor's salary. And I think you got to, even in the model church, you got to rent a building that is reasonable. Remember, you could run hundreds in your church, but you don't know if the guy following you can. The average church in America and the average auditorium in America doesn't seat thousands, it seats 100 or 200. The average church runs about 100. And so sometimes it's amazing to me how we go overseas and we want to become mega pastors. And that's not a good model. It's hard to follow that kind of model. You want to, instead of that, you want to build something they can do. So I would say, teach your people to give to missions, teach your people to give offerings, teach your people to live on a salary they're used to, that they can live on, help them buy a building, put your money into construction or purchase of a piece of property, put only enough offering in the plate to cover what a normal person, one of the wealthiest people in that church could put in, because that's who you are. And then you be building churches and build more than one church at a time. And therefore you're busy enough that your guys will get experience. I don't know if that answers the question, but you got to be very careful not to be putting in so much money that you handicap them. That wouldn't be a good model. You can't build a church with the idea, well, I'm different. I'm the American. I get to do what I want. If you do that, you're not building a model, and that's what we want here.
You have to start with the end in mind, and the fact that, what do you want this? Do you want it to continue on after you're gone? Do you want them to be able to do the work? If not, we're going to get a big building that we can run, that we can maintain, that we can pay for as missionaries, and we're going to bring in the people because we can buy the hot dogs, and we can preach that meeting, and we can pay for the buses to bus them all in. And if we're not careful, all we're doing is we're setting them up for failure. Years ago when I was in Argentina, a Argentine pastor talked to me and said, you know what, when the missionary left, we were running about 250 people. And he said, me and some of the other men had to get together and decide, what are we going to do if we're going to keep the doors open? Because no longer can we pay, he was paying around $2,000 to bus everybody in from all different areas. 2,000 pesos at the time, so it was probably about $800. And he said, so we had to decide, we're going to drop all the buses and keep the doors open. And so the missionary was doing a good job. He had a good heart. He wanted to do what's right. But when he left, all of a sudden the people didn't have the same income he did. And so we have to think of the end goal in mind. Are they going to be able to support this? Are they going to be able to do this? If not, then we're kind of setting them up for failure.
I'd like to remind you that you're not there to pastor a church. You're not there even to start a church. You're there to train a man and turn the church over to him. And so if you're not careful, you will build a church and you'll build a reputation and you'll be all about you, but you won't help that guy. And when you pull out, it's not going to work. I'd like to remind you that when you and multiple missionaries with lots of money are doing a work, you discourage young people, regular people, from doing the work. because they're like, I have nothing to offer. There's nothing I can bring to the table. I can't do all they can do. They're able to spend money. They have tons of money, and they have tons of influence, and they can do stuff I can't do. And so if you're not careful, you're going to set them up for failure. You need to be trying to play on their field. You need to try to play on their court so they learn how it works when they're doing it. And so that means you need to be very careful. You need to be very careful not to be setting them up for failure. So there's a model church for you. The idea of a model church is I'm going to build a church that can do everything and show them. I would like to see you stay enough years that church has learned how to make it. Somebody said a long time ago when I was a young preacher, they made the comment that a Bic pen was like 19 cents back in the day, and a crossing pen was $20 back in the day. And they said it takes a lot more time and a lot more money to make a crossing pen, and you can turn out Bic ink pens quickly. They're cheap, and they run out, and they don't last. And they're not something people want to hang on to. And so if you're not careful, you are going the quick and easy route when you need to be raising up children and thinking of them like your sons in the ministry so that you're able to help them continue on in the ministry long after you're gone. So let me reiterate a few things. So you want to say anything before I reiterate a few things?
I was going to bring up another point, but I'll let you read.
How about this? I think that it ought to be part of your goal to help them get a piece of property. Help them get a piece of property. And so if you can help them get a piece of property, all they have to pay is water and lights and the pastor's salary. And that's a donation you can give that keeps on giving for a long time. They'll just do maintenance on their building. I would like to ask you to be careful not to put so much money in the offering plate that your offering dwindles everything they can do. Help them get a building, but don't dwarf their offerings. Let them learn how to pay their own bills and all of that. Be careful about supporting a national pastor to such a point that he can never live on what his church could give him. Because if you do that, you're setting him up for failure when you leave. Remember, they need to be able to see how to do everything we're talking about here. They need to see how to do it. So you show them in your church. I think running and starting a new church real quickly, you show them toddler years, but you never show them teenage years. You show them how to be a child, but not how to be an adult. You show them not how to reproduce, but how to get by. And we want to do more than that. So the model church, I think, is a good idea. Mother church can be negative if you mean control. Model church is a word to use to say, let them see how to go about doing it. And just remember, you've got to teach them everything you want them to do.
You've taught for a long time, Pastor, that if a missionary can do everything, then nobody's going to try to help the missionary. And you've discussed on the importance of being needy and needing the people. Maybe you can explain a little bit of that.
I think one of the things to do is you ought to be gone from your church so often that as soon as you're able, that your people have to rise to the occasion. So that's why I like to have more than one church going at one time so that people get used to the national, not just to me. People can easily become pastorites, following the pastor, especially the missionary, the foreigner. And so I would like to say to you, if you had a second church and you were going every other Sunday, then they would say, well, you're not being much of a pastor. And you'd say, well, I'm not here to be the pastor. They're here to be the pastor. I want you to learn to follow this national pastor that we've got here. And so I think if you've got enough going on, people will help you. Now, if you're there and all you're trying to do is dump your work, nobody's going to be interested in helping you. But if they see you are running from pillar to post, trying to start churches, and you're busy doing the work, they're going to be much more interested in getting in there and helping you. I'll have to show up late because I'm preaching over in that place. I need y'all to get everything started here. I need you to get everything closed up here because I'm leaving to go to the next place. I don't have enough money to make this church everything it ought to be because I'm trying to help a whole bunch of churches. And you don't ever say to them, I don't have enough money, because they know that's a lie. They know you've come to the field with a lot of money. And so they're going to know that you're lying when you say you don't have enough money. Just make sure you've got enough ministry going, you're spending the money.
You know, I think a lot of times as missionaries, we delegate things off or we'll give jobs out, to different people, either because we don't want to do the job or because we're lazy with something. And people can see right through that. They don't want that. But as Pastor said, if we are busy, literally busy doing the work that we need other people, then all of a sudden they will rise to that occasion. And so they'll start working. And when they start working, a lot more people get involved. When a lot more people get involved, things start to grow and things begin to happen.
Yeah, I think what you want to do is you want to always be opening jobs for them. We need, in every city, we need dozens of churches. I hear missionaries, they need such a large budget for that one building, but they won't have money for a second building. I would far prefer to tell you to get something smaller that you could do, where you could put your ministry in a small place and have more than one ministry, is to see you have just this one large ministry. So we want to look at things and we want to say, how can we get more done, not less done? That ought to be our goal.
We've got another question, Pastor. When the guys that have been trained are ready to start another church, how far should the church be planted from the model church?
Well, I think the main thing from you want to get far enough away that that you're working together, but you're not competing and not stealing people. I would say that to you that I want in Peru. I know that most people are going to walk, except in the more wealthy areas of the city. And even a church that has 100 people may only have 15 cars or 20 cars. Church like Vision, we park about 115 every Sunday. 115 cars is out in front of our church. That's not really going to happen. We're going to have one car for about every 2 people in our church, maybe 3 people at the most. And that's not going to be true overseas. So I would say a kilometer, 2 kilometers apart is probably a good amount. But it depends on where you are, because in a more like here in Alpharetta, I wouldn't do that because people are going to drive cars. But in many large cities, they're going to use public transportation or they're going to walk. And I think a good way to know how far apart is to look where the stores are, and not just the mega stores, but the stores they go to on a regular basis. And of course, you're dealing with so many different variables here. If you're talking about a place like Japan, where there's much more modern and things, or you're talking about Africa. So I would just say, what will people reasonably do? In the U.S., most people won't come more than about 5 miles. If you go out and knock on doors 10 miles away from your church, unless you're rural and you say, hey, I want you to come, 10 miles for them is 20 or 30 minutes because you're in a city, and they're like, that's way too far. We have people that like to boast about it being 5 minutes to the church. I think a weakness on overseas a lot of times and in many churches is nobody lives close to the church. And so, I would challenge you to get a church where it could evangelize, and where when you step out to the neighbors and say, I'd like to invite you to the church, they'd say, oh, right over here. Yeah, no problem. Not, wow, that's so far away. I don't want to go. That's too far away. Because people might go that far for work. They will go that far for work. They might go that far for a special evening of amusement. But to go 2-3 times a week, every week, to learn and serve God, most people won't do that, especially when they first get saved.
I would say in our churches in Argentina, the majority of them, probably 80-85% of church people came on public transportation, on train or on bus, walking. The other 15% came from motorcycle or from vehicle, and most of those were motorcycles. I can remember standing outside saying, we've got 8 cars today. This is the amazing service.
You had a lot of motorcycles.
But we had a whole lot.
And then you had bicycles. I remember
Yes,
I remember one guy come in with his 3 people on a bicycle.
They were good. They were talented. And because of that, then I think, as Pastor already said, in that kind of situation, you can know planning a church a kilometer from there. Obviously, it's a whole different neighborhood with different people, and not the same people are going to just jump in their car and run over there to that. So it makes it a little bit different.
I think a good way maybe to even consider it is, where's the police station? Typically, people want a police station fairly close by, and the government wants a fire station, medical post maybe. But where is something that people, like what people feel like they need In Arequipa, they might put a medical post. It's called a post. I don't know what the word would be in English, but a medical facility that would be not the major hospital. It's only where you go for first
little
aid.
clinic.
Yeah, a little clinic, and then you go to the hospital if you need big stuff. But there's a clinic right there. There's a police station 20 blocks from where you are, 30 blocks from where you are, even if they won't respond if you call them. But typically you want to think in terms of neighborhoods where people live, and they have their whole life in that neighborhood except for work, which they will cross over that border for.
Well, Pastor, I think we're in the 30-minute range, so we might want to wind it down and continue on another time. Maybe we can recap a little bit what we've discussed.
Well, I think we want to build, I would suggest, a model church. Please understand, if you do things differently, I love you and respect you. I saw Randy Sturwalt on here. Brother Randy's probably the greatest missionary I've ever known, and I don't know, 350, 400 churches, and he's never pastored a church. He has taught people to start churches and help them from the side, and he gives very little money, and God has used him greatly. That's a good model. And then people that have started a church and moved on, I think God has used you, and so in no way do I belittle that. And then I even think people that might have a mother church, I think God can use that. I'm not trying to say that things aren't right. I'm just saying I'd like the idea of you starting multiple churches, training multiple leaders, and getting people there. I'd like to remind you to not put so much money in the first church you can't help the second church. And I'd like to remind you to train lay people that will be able to help in the leadership and government of your church. Because there is a day coming when one of the pastors you trained does wrong. And if they've been taught all their lives just to do what the pastor says, they won't take a stand. Even if he's using bad doctrine, even if he's stealing money, even if he's into immorality, they just won't take a stand. And so we can't allow that. You got anything else to add there?
No, sir. I've got some closing announcements.
Go ahead. Let's make them closing announcements.
Okay. Well, we have coming up a marriage retreat in July 26th through the 28th. We'd love to invite you. We have 2 openings currently to fill in the hotel. And if you would like to come or find out a little bit more about that, visionbaptist.com. You can find out July 26th, 27th, 28th. That's a Thursday evening, Friday all day, Saturday morning. You can check that out, visionbaptist.com, that marriage retreat. And then we have coming up in August 3rd, 4th, and 5th, we have an open house for what we do around here for the training center. We call it a Vision Impact Weekend, August 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And that's pretty much an open house to find out about our training, about what goes on around here. We'd love to invite you for that. Then at the end of the year, we have our Generation Summit. And this year, we've usually done it in Atlanta. This year, we're going up to Columbus, Ohio area, December 28th and 29th, the last weekend of the year. And we would love to have you in for that.
We sure would. And thank you so much for listening. Brother Randy Sturwalt says buying property for the church is great advice. Anytime he agrees with me, I'm excited. Raleigh Hill said awesome podcast, very helpful, thank you. And Patricio Sheridan, do you have dates for the 2019 marriage retreat? We probably do, but he will give them to you in just a second before we close. Thank you all for being with us today, and thank you for what you're doing for the cause of world evangelism around the world. Let me just tell you, we're excited about anybody doing anything that magnifies the name of Jesus. And we're excited about anybody and any church model that you use to get the gospel out. We're excited about that, and never want to come across like this is we know what we're doing or we're better than anyone else. We're just here to love you and help you do the work. So here's dates for next year, I think.
Yes, sir. Marriage retreat in 2019 would be July 25th through the 27th of 2019. So this year it's 26th through the 28th. Next year, July 25th through the 27th.
Well, thank y'all for being with us, and thank you for listening on the podcast. And Brother Baird, thank you for y'all coming down to visit us here. And sure, I'm glad y'all liked Papa Do's. Good place to come. Come back down. I'll take you out to eat there again. And so Jeff will be turning off the Facebook, and I'm going to go ahead and sign us off from the Leadership with Vision podcast. Thank you, and God bless each and every one of you.